Good afternoon, everyone. This is Attorney Tina Patterson with Patterson Justice Council in Detroit, Michigan, where we help homeowners, business owners, and property owners and investors to protect their property, have their rights respected, and to leave legacies to their lineage. And so today we're going to be talking about how they plan to take your property and what to do to avoid that happening. Now, who is they? Well, this is the first in a three-part series, so we're going to get into the first of those theys today, right now. The first one is government, the government, because believe it or not, they always have a plan for whatever it is you have. And that is especially true when it comes to the areas of estate planning. What happens to your property after you pass away? If you don't create your own plan through a will, through a trust, through some kind of written documentation of what you want to have happen to it, if you don't transfer it automatically through like a beneficiary policy, then the government has a plan for what can happen to that property and who can get it. So it's very important to notice and to just be aware that if you don't make a plan, there's already one for you made. All right. So you're either going to design your plan or you're going to be defaulted into the plan ready for you. So the government, aside from just the probate aspect of it, there are three other ways that they can take property from you and in ways you may not have even thought about. So we get into the first one. The first one we all know about, but not in this particular way. The first one is foreclosure. So we all know that we pay property taxes on the property that we own. And if you default, if you don't pay them, right, then the house can go into foreclosure. Or if you don't pay the mortgage, the house can go into a foreclosure, which means you didn't pay for it. Now we can take it back. That can also happen in by failing to plan for property in an estate plan. So how we were talking about at the beginning. And I'm going to give you a real life example of all the things we're going to talk about today so you can avoid doing this. All right. So when it comes to foreclosure, right, back taxes on property, you don't have to be alive for that to happen. It can happen when you pass away too. Okay. You can be, let's say let me just get into the real life example. And I have two of them. Let me get into the first one. The first one was a woman who passed away unexpectedly in her 40s, left a minor child behind. There was a case open to get custody of the minor child to a family member, but she also owned a property. She owned a home. Nothing happened with the home. There was no probate to open up that home or to try to get ownership of the home, to secure the ownership for the custody and the care of the child. None of that. So it was allowed to lapse. And then what happens, right? We talked about property taxes. So the property taxes pile up and pile up and pile up. And eventually the home is foreclosed. Okay. The home is foreclosed. And government owns it. That's what happens. And instead of the child having a home to grow up in, right? A home to eventually acquire when she became an adult, there's nothing there. The government took the home, nothing there. That's one example of foreclosure, not in like the traditional sense when we're still living here, but even if you don't take care of the property when you pass away, you don't have a plan for it, they have a plan for you. Second example is similar. So a male who passed away after a terminal illness, suffered for just a little time, passed away, had a few properties. Okay, so a family home and an adjacent home that were taken care of. Probate was open, but there was also another property in a neighboring suburb that whoever was in charge of the estate didn't want to deal with. And that home already had back taxes on it, and the back taxes were only $3,000. Now, instead of securing that property, right, paying off the $3,000 and maybe converting that property into a rental property, right, that can then support the widow, right, as just another income producing asset, something she doesn't even have to go to work for, but just can collect money from. The house was allowed to lapse, $3,000, foreclosed, gone. So it's just amazing to me. I think we don't really see the value of what is in front of us. So yeah, it was an old house in a neighboring suburb. Yes, there was $3,000 left on it, but how much more could it have become? Right? We think about what we're losing in front of us. We think we're just, oh well, $3,000, I can't pay that. That's too much. What if you can get that every year just from rental income? Right? You pay it one time, but you can get it every year. and it's been 10 years since the passing of that gentleman, that's $30,000, right? That you don't have to work for, right? And that's just a best case or an example. It can be even higher than that, just depending on how you are approaching the property. So foreclosure is number one, foreclosure. And it doesn't have to be you living here. We're talking about especially when you pass away and you don't have a will or something written in place on what to do with the property. Be very careful of that. Be very mindful of that. So number one is foreclosure. Number two is repossession. And this is just wild. It happens. It happens. I have a case. You wouldn't believe some of the cases that come into my office, but the government is not looking out for your best interest. Just don't believe that. Okay. We want to put our faith in government and our taxes and all that stuff. I'm not telling you not to do that, but always be mindful and put your own best interests ahead of anybody else and what they're telling you they can do for you, or even any agreements they make with you. So the second example is repossession. So I had a client who bought a lot, which is just a little piece of land of property from the government here in the city of Detroit. Bought the property, had it notarized, signed the contract. All of her information was verified, and she was eligible for the property. The head of the department, the executive of the department, is the one who signed the agreement, had it notarized, and everything. So she owned the property legally, went through all the channels to do that. Well, years later, a neighbor said, well, no, actually, that's my property. I should have the title, right? I should be the rightful owner. So that neighbor sued my client and sued the city government, saying that it was invalid. Even though they went through these whole processes, notarized, officiated, all that stuff. She said it was invalid. She should have it. Well, the city agreed with this neighbor. The city did not honor the commitment with my client. And instead, they took the property from my client. They literally took the deed from her. It's called gorging. They gorged the deed from her, took it away in court, took it from her, said she's not the rightful owner, said that she was not eligible, and that the contract was a mistake. Even though, like I just said, everything was notarized, the top executive of the department, okay, not the assistant, not the manager, the top executive who oversaw the entire department is the one who signed off on it. And the city still said it was not valid. We took it to court. We challenged it up and down the court system for about 4 years. And the Court of Appeals, which is the second highest court in this state, said, no, my client is the rightful owner. Give her back the property. They did that twice. Okay. A 4-year battle for something that was completely valid and legal from the beginning. All right. Repossession. Be very mindful. And I think the thing that made that case so successful is because my client was very organized with her documentation. She had everything that she needed to prove that this was valid. She had everything ready and signed to go. She had all the policies in place. Be very mindful of what you have, of what you own, and of what the contract of it is saying, because anybody can try to make a claim for it. It just doesn't matter if you gave them all the gold in your mind. They will still say something was wrong with it and try to get more out of you and take from you. Be very mindful of that, okay? And government, we think the government has all the answers and they know everything. They don't. They don't. So don't be afraid to challenge the government if you know in your heart that you did everything you said you were supposed to do. You are entitled to everything that you have, right? You didn't usurp anything. You didn't fraudulently present yourself. This is yours. I'm going to keep it, okay? Because repossession will happen if you allow it to in that kind of way. So that's number two. And then number three is something that is not talked about often, but it can lead to almost an abandonment of property. And that is excessive fines and tickets. So I've had a couple of cases come before me where, and these are business owners that it mostly happens to, small business owners, people that buy property in the community and they want to reinvest in their own community. They want to reinvigorate the community and have big plans and dreams. I've seen like entire presentations of what they have that they want to bring to that neighborhood. So to buy a property, and it's usually dilapidated because in the city of Detroit, the city is the largest landowner in the city. So they own a lot of vacant property, a lot of blighted property. They don't upkeep it, but then when they sell it to people, they expect them to upkeep it. And if they don't, they'll come and ticket you. They'll ticket you. Well, this particular business owner had a property, was fixing it up, did everything they needed to do for it, but the city was excessively handing out tickets. And on top of that, was trying to make this client liable for tickets on that property from 15 years ago. And 15 years before then, my client was a minor child, okay, under the age of 18, but still was saying, well, you own the property now. It's up to you. You know, it's your responsibility. And I don't even know if it was the same name on the property before. It was just a mess. But it was thousands of dollars. We're talking about thousands of dollars worth of ticketing on top of already thousands of dollars of investment in trying to bring the property up to code, right? And trying to make it something that is habitable and viable. But when you're saying that you're owed like $2,000-3,000 worth of tickets that you have no responsibility for, and you're constantly being, reminded of that, it makes you want to give up on the property. Well, that didn't happen in this particular case. I got involved. We got all the tickets dismissed. Okay. But that did happen to another business owner in the same community who was also reinvesting in the property, right? Spending money to get it up to code, but was just getting excessively ticketed, even though the things that are the tickets are being issued for are being addressed. Well, this business owner had enough and just abandoned the property, abandoned the plans, abandoned the vision, didn't want to go through with it anymore. Okay. That's how government can just kind of nag at you until the property is just taken from you. And it may not be for something that you actually owe. It may not be for something that you're actually liable for. It may be something that you've already taken care of. It may be something that you've already executed a valid agreement on. It may be something that you have in place, a plan in place with. I have seen horror stories of property destruction, of property. I had a case where the city is coming to repaint property that doesn't match the decor at all, and there's like no order for it. Okay, it happens. It happens. So don't think it can't happen to you. Don't be unprepared. All right. Always keep in mind that if you don't have a plan, somebody has one for you. And a lot of times when it comes to property, physical, real property, whether it's your home, whether it is a commercial property, a business building that you're planning to develop, somebody has a plan for it. And that somebody is usually government, because in the end, they're going to get taxes on it. They're going to get paid on it. And if, it just follows in line. If there is no other person to claim the property when you pass away, it's going to revert to the government automatically by law. Okay. So they always have an interest in your property, but you have to make sure that your interest is greater in your own property and the own protection of that property. All right. So that's part one of how they plan to take your property. The first one was government. Next week, we'll come back with part two of how they plan to take your property, and we'll talk about who that next day is then. All right. Next Wednesday, July, I think 5th, right after the 4th of July holiday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll see you then. Bye.